On my 47th birthday, they made me wear a crown that said King of Letdowns. Everyone laughed, even my wife. I pretended to laugh too. I cooked the food, took the group photos, and paid for everything. That night, I blocked everyone on Instagram. 3 weeks later, my daughter was on Instagram begging, "If anyone sees my dad, please tell him we're sorry." I, 47 thought turning 47 would be different. Maybe a quiet dinner, some cake. Perhaps my wife would remember that I actually hate surprise parties. Instead, I found myself standing in our living room at 7 p.m., staring at 20 people who had apparently conspired to humiliate me on what was supposed to be my day. The crown appeared first. My brother-in-law pulled it from behind his back with a kind of theatrical flourish that made my stomach drop. Bright yellow plastic with glittery letters spelling out King of Letdowns across the front. The room erupted in laughter before I even processed what was happening. My wife was laughing the hardest. Not the polite chuckle you give when someone makes a bad joke, but the kind of deep, genuine laughter that comes from your belly. The same laugh I used to love hearing when we first met, now directed at my expense. She doubled over, wiping tears from her eyes, and I felt something crack inside my chest. I forced my mouth into what I hoped resembled a smile. Everyone was watching, their phones already out, recording what would surely become another family story told at gatherings for years to come. So I laughed too. I put on that ridiculous crown and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. My daughter, home from college for the weekend, was recording everything on her phone. She looked mortified for about half a second before joining in with everyone else. That hurt more than I expected. The evening continued its predetermined course. I found myself in the kitchen, preparing the food I had bought and planned myself. Apparently, organizing your own humiliation wasn't enough. You also had to cater it. My wife flitted around the living room, playing hostess to our guests, occasionally calling out requests for more ice or asking where I'd put the good napkins. I grilled the steaks exactly how everyone liked them. Medium rare for my brother, well done for my mother-in-law, no seasoning for my wife's college roommate, who was apparently on some cleanse. I arranged the sides I prepared that morning, refilled drinks, and made sure everyone had what they needed. The crown stayed on my head the entire time. When it came time for photos, I was the designated photographer. 23 shots of various group combinations while I stood behind the camera, directing everyone to smile or move closer together. Finally, someone suggested we needed a photo with the birthday boy, so I handed over my phone and stood in the back row, that stupid crown catching the camera flash. The gift opening was its own special torture. Joke presents, mostly. A coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Husband." A t-shirt with a picture of a dad bod and the words, "Peak Performance." A book about midlife crises that everyone found hilarious. My wife had contributed a set of compression socks for when you're feeling old. As the evening wound down, I found myself calculating numbers in my head. The steaks, the sides, the cake, the decorations, the drinks, everything had come from my credit card. I'd financed my own roast, literally and figuratively. The last guest left around midnight. My wife collapsed on the couch, exhausted from all the hostessing, and told me what a great party it had been. She said everyone had such a good time, and wasn't it nice to see everyone together? I agreed that it was wonderful while loading plates into the dishwasher. My daughter hugged me goodnight and said she was sorry if the crown thing went too far, but that everyone was just having fun. I told her not to worry about it, that I understood, and that I was glad she was home for the weekend. After everyone went to bed, I sat in my office with my laptop open. Instagram was already flooded with photos from the party. My wife had posted an album titled Celebrating Our King of Letdowns, with laughing crying emojis. Every single photo showed me wearing that crown, smiling like an idiot. The comments were rolling in. Friends and family members sharing in the joke, talking about how good-natured I was, how I could really take a joke. My cousin had already shared it to her story with the caption, "Goals. Find a man who can laugh at himself." I started blocking them systematically. My wife first, then my daughter, then every person who had been at the party. Then their spouses, their kids, extended family members who had liked and commented on the photos. My finger moved across the screen mechanically, hitting that block button over and over until my feed was clean. The next morning brought confusion. My wife asked why she couldn't see my Instagram anymore. I told her I was taking a break from social media. She seemed puzzled but distracted by other things. My daughter called that afternoon, asking if I'd blocked her by accident. I let it go to voicemail. I went to work Monday morning like nothing had changed. My colleagues asked about my birthday weekend, and I told them it was nice and quiet. I didn't mention the crown or the photos or the way my chest still felt hollow when I thought about my wife's laughter. 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of peace. No notifications, no tagged photos, no family drama playing out in my pocket. I focused on work projects, started reading actual books again, began taking walks in the evening instead of scrolling through my phone. My wife grew increasingly agitated about my social media absence. She asked multiple times if I was upset about something, if the party had bothered me, if I was having some kind of midlife crisis. I assured her everything was fine, that I was just enjoying the break from all the online noise. My daughter called more frequently, but I kept missing her calls. Work was busy, I told myself. I'd call her back when things calmed down. Then my neighbor knocked on my door on a Thursday evening. She looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot on my doorstep. She asked if everything was okay with my family because my daughter had been posting some concerning things on Instagram. That's when I learned about the posts. My daughter had started with subtle hints that she was worried about me, then more direct appeals, asking if anyone had heard from me, if anyone knew why I wasn't responding to messages. The posts had escalated over the past week. My neighbor showed me screenshots on her phone. My daughter's latest post was a photo of us from when she was little, me pushing her on a swing at the park. The caption read, "If anyone sees my dad, please tell him we're sorry. We didn't mean to hurt him. I just want my dad back." The post had dozens of comments. Family members expressing confusion and concern. Friends asking what had happened. My wife had commented that I was fine, just taking a break from social media, but even she sounded uncertain now. I stared at that photo for a long time. My daughter couldn't have been more than 7, gap-toothed and grinning as I pushed her higher into the air. I remembered that day clearly. It was just a random Saturday, but she'd talked about it for weeks afterward, how high she'd gone, how strong her daddy was. That night, I sat in my office again, laptop open, cursor hovering over the Instagram login screen. The hollow feeling in my chest had grown into something else over the past 3 weeks. Not anger anymore, but something colder and more calculating. I logged back into chaos. Hundreds of notifications, messages from family members ranging from confused to concerned to angry. My wife had posted increasingly frantic updates about my disappearance from social media. My brother had started a group chat trying to organize an intervention, but it was my daughter's posts that cut deepest. The progression from worry to panic to desperate public pleas painted a picture I hadn't intended to create. She was genuinely scared, thinking something terrible had happened to me. I started with a single post. No explanation, no dramatic revelation. Just a photo of my morning coffee and the caption, "Good morning." Simple, normal, like nothing had happened. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. My daughter called first, crying with relief, asking where I'd been and why I hadn't been answering. I told her I'd been taking some time to think, that I was fine, that I was sorry for worrying her. My wife's reaction was different. She was angry, demanding to know why I'd disappeared, why I'd made everyone worry, what kind of game I thought I was playing. I told her it wasn't a game, just a break, and that I hadn't realized anyone would be so concerned. Over the next few days, the family dynamic had shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. My daughter was clingy when she called, afraid I might disappear again. My wife walked on eggshells, unsure how to interact with me. Extended family members reached out individually, some apologetic, others defensive about the party. My brother called to check on me, and during the conversation, he mentioned how scared everyone had been. He said my wife had been calling family members, wondering if I was having a breakdown or if something was wrong with our marriage. My daughter had apparently called her grandmother crying, convinced something terrible had happened to me. The power dynamic in my house had changed completely. My wife, who had been comfortable with our routine of her making social plans while I provided the logistics and financing, suddenly seemed uncertain about everything. She asked permission before making plans, checked with me before posting on social media, and seemed genuinely worried about my state of mind. My daughter started calling me more often, just to chat about school and her life. She'd never done that before. Our conversations had always been brief, functional updates about grades or money or plans. Now she wanted to talk about her classes, her roommate, random thoughts she'd had during the day. I realized I'd inadvertently taught my family something about taking me for granted. For years, I'd been the reliable constant, the one who would cook, pay, organize, and smile through whatever they planned. My 3-week absence had shown them what life looked like when that reliability suddenly vanished. The crown incident became something we didn't talk about anymore. No one brought up the photos or the jokes or how funny it had all been. When my wife's friends asked about my birthday party, she deflected, saying it was nice and leaving it at that. Update 1. 2 months after my Instagram disappearance, things had settled into a new normal that was both better and stranger than before. My family treated me with a kind of careful respect that I'd never experienced. But I also realized I'd opened a door I couldn't close. My daughter came home for spring break and spent most of her time with me. We went to museums, took long walks, and had conversations that went deeper than anything we'd shared in years. She asked me directly if I'd been happy, if there were things about our family that bothered me, if I felt appreciated. I told her honestly that sometimes I felt invisible, like my role was to provide and facilitate rather than participate. She listened without defending anyone, then said she'd never realized how much I did for everyone. She said the 3 weeks when no one knew where I was had been terrifying, that she'd imagined every possible worst-case scenario. My wife's approach was more complex. She seemed to view my disappearance as a warning shot, a sign that our marriage might be in trouble. She started suggesting date nights, asking about my day with genuine interest, and including me in social planning decisions. But there was also a wariness there, like she was dealing with something unpredictable. The extended family's reaction revealed something I hadn't expected. Several relatives reached out privately to apologize for the birthday party, saying they'd followed my wife's lead without thinking about how it might affect me. My brother admitted he'd always thought I was too passive, but that watching everyone panic when I vanished had made him realize how central I was to holding everything together. My mother-in-law, surprisingly, was the most direct. She called to say she'd been thoughtless at the party and that she'd raised my wife to expect men to be endlessly accommodating. She said she was proud of me for standing up for myself, even if I'd done it in an unconventional way. But the most significant change was in how I saw myself. The 3 weeks of silence had shown me that I could exist independently of my role as provider and peacekeeper. I'd enjoyed the quiet, the freedom from constant social obligations, the absence of pressure to be agreeable all the time. Update 2. 6 months later, my wife found my journal. I'd started keeping one during my Instagram hiatus, working through feelings I'd buried for years. She read entries about feeling unappreciated, about the Crown incident, about my growing resentment of always being expected to finance and facilitate everyone else's good times. The confrontation was explosive. She accused me of plotting against our family, of being manipulative and passive-aggressive. She said disappearing like that had been emotional abuse, that I traumatized our daughter just to make a point. I told her she was right about some of it. I had been manipulative, but not consciously. I'd been trying to manage my resentment by disappearing instead of addressing it directly. But I also told her that the Crown incident had crystallized years of feeling like everyone's doormat, and that her reaction to my journal proved she still saw me primarily as someone who should absorb family dysfunction without complaint. We started marriage counseling at her insistence. The therapist helped us identify patterns we'd both contributed to. My wife admitted she'd taken my reliability for granted and had encouraged family dynamics that made me feel invisible. I acknowledged that my disappearing act had been a form of punishment, even if I hadn't consciously intended it that way. The therapy sessions revealed how differently we'd experienced our marriage. She thought we'd been happy because I never complained and always went along with plans. I realized I'd trained everyone to ignore my preferences by never expressing them clearly. The Crown incident wasn't really about the Crown. It was about 20 years of feeling like my role was to be the family's good sport while everyone else got to be authentic. My daughter, now aware of the deeper issues, became something of a mediator. She pointed out that both parents had contributed to the problems, but that Dad's feelings were valid even if his methods were questionable. She said watching our family nearly fall apart had taught her things about relationships she hoped to remember in her own future marriage. Update 3. A year later, we're in a different place entirely. My wife and I stayed together, but our marriage looks nothing like it did before. I speak up about social plans, suggest alternatives when I'm not interested in something, and refuse to automatically pay for everything without discussion. The changes weren't popular with everyone. Some family members think I've become difficult or selfish. My wife's college roommate made a comment about men going through phases, and I told her directly that expecting someone to finance their own humiliation wasn't reasonable at any age. My daughter, now a senior, wrote her psychology capstone project about family dynamics and emotional labor. She interviewed both parents about our marriage crisis, with permission, and concluded that traditional gender roles had created an unsustainable situation where one person's needs became invisible to everyone, including himself. The Crown sits in our junk drawer now. My wife kept it, though neither of us talks about why. Sometimes I catch her looking at it with an expression I can't quite read, regret, maybe, or recognition of how close we came to losing everything over something that seemed funny at the time. I still avoid large family gatherings, not out of resentment anymore, but because I've learned to recognize situations where I'm likely to slip back into old patterns. My brother understands and doesn't push. My daughter visits individually now, and our relationship is stronger than it's ever been. The most unexpected outcome is that several other family members have made changes in their own relationships. My cousin left her husband after realizing she'd been carrying all the emotional labor in their marriage. My brother started therapy to address his own people-pleasing tendencies. People ask if I regret the Instagram disappearance, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The honest answer is no. Sometimes you have to disappear to learn who you are when you're not performing for everyone else. Sometimes the people who love you need to experience your absence to recognize your presence. I'm still the same person who likes to cook and take photos and make sure everyone has what they need. But now I do it because I choose to, not because it's expected. And when someone hands me a crown that says King of Letdowns, I don't put it on anymore. I hand it back.